Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Wendy sighed heavily and looked. She went into the bedroom, grabbed a fresh robe, and headed into the bathroom for a quick shower. Then she changed. Oh man, this one isn't taking long either, grumbled Wendy as she tried to fasten the buttons on her robe. She looked sadly at herself in the mirror. Yes, she had put on a little weight lately. Wendy frowned, which was a crooked way of saying not slightly. A lot, and it's starting to show. She bought this robe a month ago because all the old ones were too small for her, and now it's not even tight anymore. Wendy, without looking in the mirror, tied her hair in such a ponytail wall to floor and robe. She jogged quickly into the bedroom, opened the closet, and looked around the shelves sadly. Well, there wasn't much choice. Almost all of the clothes had become small, and Wendy was in no hurry to get a new closet. There were two reasons for that. First, she hoped to lose weight, and the second was that she didn't have the extra money to update her entire closet. Wendy was still not working. After the birth of her children, her husband alone provided for the family to update the closet. She and 3 paychecks would no longer be enough for him. Sighing heavily, Wendy pulled out the long t-shirt she had worn when she was pregnant with Jenna. She'd wanted to cut it into rags, but hadn't gotten around to it. Well, now she would have to use it for its intended purpose again, pulling it over her full body. Putting it on, Wendy noted with satisfaction that she looked quite decent. It's not that bad. Wendy doesn't talk down to herself. You just had 2 kids. You're in great shape. You should be happy. You didn't have such a magnificent bust when you were young, she said, looking at herself in the mirror. Then Wendy looked into the nursery. Charles and Jenna were playing. In an hour, she would have to put them to bed. In the meantime, she could get ready for work on the loggia. Then she would put the children to bed and sit down to her favorite task. Wendy went to the loggia and turned on the light. How lucky were they to buy this apartment? There was just a huge loggia. It quietly accommodated everything for Wendy's favorite hobby, which made her forget about everything in the world. Wendy dreamed of becoming a sculptor and thoughtfully went about fulfilling her dream. She lovingly began laying out tools, hibernators, knives, and stakes on the table. There was also a sculpting board. Taking out a package of clay, she carefully placed it on the table, then laid out all the tools in the order she would need them today. A smile played on her face. Wendy had never learned to mold professionally. She had no artistic training, but she had a gift. She had loved molding with plasticine since she was a little girl. Yes, she made such figures that the teachers at school took them to the exhibition. She loved to sculpt and was very sad that when she left her parents' house, her mother threw away all her exhibits, which the girl so lovingly kept for many years. But after school, to engage in modeling, she no longer had time. She wanted to become a doctor, but it did not work out to enter the university, and she went to college. After college, she wanted to go to an institute, but she met Kevin. 6 months later, she was pregnant, and they got married. Family life began, and Wendy had no time to pursue her hobby. When Charles grew up, Wendy again remembered that she wanted to go to university. But she got pregnant again, and Jenna was born. Jenna was calmer than Charles, and Wendy had more free time. She started researching on the internet. One day, she came across a video where a woman taught her how to mold beautiful sculptures out of clay. Wendy watched a few lessons, and she watched them without tearing up and decided to give it a try. She had succeeded. She had set up a workshop on the loggia where she could create beauty. Wendy woke up and looked at her watch. It was time to put the kids to bed. She and Kevin were not cranky kids. She headed out in 15 minutes. There was no need to sit with them for long. Wendy kissed the kids, wished them good night, turned off the lights, and headed for the loggia. Putting on her apron, she set to work. Soon an intricate figure began to emerge under her hands. Wendy was able to mold faces, people's heads, and animal figures. Now she let her imagination run free and forgot about everything in the world. She even lost track of time. It was as if she were in another reality. There was a small tape recorder on the windowsill, playing quiet and peaceful music. Her eyes were burning. Her hands moved ceaselessly. Wendy was in her element when her husband came in from work. The infatuated wife didn't even hear, not finding her in the kitchen. He immediately realized she was on the loggia, standing in the doorway. Kevin watched to see what his betrothed was doing. He called her name quietly, but she didn't hear. "Wendy." "I came again," Kevin said. But Wendy was all worked up. Then Kevin walked cautiously into the loggia and gently touched her shoulder. "Oh my God," Wendy exclaimed. She jumped up in her chair and twitched. Immediately a lump of clay fell off the figure. "What's the matter with you?" "I told you not to scare me when I'm working. Look what you've done. I'm almost done, and you've ruined everything," Wendy said with annoyance. Kevin frowned. "Why are you blaming me?" "I called out to you, and you didn't answer. I just touched you. You jerked your own hand." "If you hadn't frightened me, I wouldn't have jerked," muttered Wendy, trying to glue a piece of the fallen-off figurine back on. But it was no use. The figurine was ruined. Wendy frustratedly put the piece that had fallen off on the table and looked at her husband. "You could have left me alone. Dinner's on the stove. You could have eaten it yourself, and I could have finished it," she said. "I don't see you enough with these shifts. I thought you'd sit with me today. We hardly ever see each other. I go to work, you're on the loggia. I come home from work. You're there again. It's like you don't do anything else," Kevin replied with a disgruntled look. "Yeah, does he make his own dinner? And the kids feed themselves and bathe themselves and put themselves to bed and do their own laundry. And someone else does the cleaning too, I guess." Kevin opened his mouth but said nothing. Wendy sighed and closed her eyes. It was those fights again. They were becoming more frequent lately. She needed to pull herself together and calm down. She sighed and said to her husband in a calmer voice, "Okay, let's get dressed. I'll be right there. I'll play dinner for you. There's nothing more to do here anyway. I'll try to fix it tomorrow." "Go on. I'll hide all the tools for now," she said. Kevin left. Wendy started to clean up her table. She was very unhappy. Everything was going so well until her husband came home from work. He always got in her way. But by the time Wendy had everything in its place, she had calmed down. Kevin was right. With his diary shifts, they hadn't communicated in almost 4 days. She went to the bathroom, washed her hands and face thoroughly, then threw her apron into the washing machine and went into the kitchen. "You didn't conspire to put tea in yourself." He looked his wife over from head to toe, holding up her old stretchy tank top. "What's your view, Wendy?" he muttered. Wendy looked herself over as if she'd seen it. For the first time, she shrugged. "What's wrong with my look?" "The working look." "Kevin, you have work clothes, don't you?" "I have work clothes. Think of it as my robe." Wendy laughed a little, thinking it was a good joke. However, Kevin's face did not change. It was clear he wasn't happy with the sight of his wife. Wendy silently reheated his late supper. She put the plates on the table. Kevin sat down and began to eat. Wendy made herself some tea and sat down next to him. She looked at her husband, but he looked away. The conversation was not going well. They just sat at the table in silence. Lately, something had been wrong between them. Of course, Kevin was getting tired. They were an ordinary family. The poor husband worked in a factory as a shift worker on weekends to earn an extra penny. Household and lack of money ate up all the romance of their family life. Between them, long gone passion. However, Wendy still believed that all was well. They loved each other, respected each other. And passion fades with time, doesn't it? Right? It's probably too soon to tell, though. I mean, it's only been 8 years since they were married. They were young and vigorous, but they acted like they were in their 50s. When Wendy gave birth to their second child, Kevin supported her and helped her. She told him how nice it would be if she could work part-time from home. She picked her hobbies. She wanted to sculpt clay and plaster sculptures and sell them. But that required training. But first, she wanted to try it at home and then find some courses. Kevin liked the idea. They went and bought everything they needed. And for 3 years, Wendy practiced her hobby at home. But the children were growing up, and money was increasingly scarce. No courses were out of the question. And Kevin realized that Wendy will not earn money so immediately, so his joy from his wife's new hobby gradually faded. For the past few months, he had often grumbled that that was all she was doing. It was a pointless waste of precious time. Wendy tried to convince him that everything was ahead of her, that she could succeed. But Kevin didn't believe it anymore. "How are you doing at work?" Wendy asked cheerfully, trying to make conversation with her husband. Kevin looked at her unhappily and answered as if I worked in a bank. "Have you forgotten what it can be like at work? It's business as usual. Do you want to know how many pipes I hauled today, or how badly I fought with the sales girl? Do you want me to tell you how many foul words she said to me? Or how the foreman called me in for a pounding?" he grumbled. Wendy blushed slightly. That wasn't the way to start the conversation. "No, of course it wasn't. I just wanted to see how tired you were today. Maybe we could watch a movie or have a drink. It's your day off tomorrow. We have a bottle of wine, we could open it. Have a glass," she suggested it. Kevin almost choked. "Wendy, what kind of wine do you want me to drink in the morning? Have you forgotten? You drink it yourself if you want. I'll go to bed later." There was silence. Wendy realized that a private evening was out of the question. She sat next to her husband for a couple more minutes, washed her cup, and said, "I don't want to go to bed yet." "Why don't I sit on the loggia then? I have some sketches to draw." "Good night, good night," Kevin muttered back. When Wendy left, her husband stared after her for a few minutes. He wrinkled his nose because there were some very unpleasant thoughts in his head that kept him busy and would not allow him to relax. He, too, had noticed that things had not been going well between him and Wendy lately. Why would he lie? It's been going on for a long time. It all started when she got into that worthless molding thing. That's when Wendy changed. She used to be fun, liked to go out. They used to go out a lot. From the moment she gave birth to Olia from behind the seat on her loggia, it was as if she had been replaced. Now Wendy tried not to leave the house too much. Of course, they went shopping, but only when it was necessary to visit or just go for a walk. Her wife could not be dragged out. She didn't even see her friends much anymore. Vanessa and Evelyn often invited her to visit, but Wendy only went to their birthdays. Yes, they talked on the phone a lot, but Wendy hardly ever left the house. She liked to spend every free minute on the loggia, doing her nonsense. Kevin was sure that this was what had caused the chill to form between them. Wendy had a sedentary lifestyle. This had caused her to put on a lot of weight. Naturally, Kevin noticed what she was wearing today. He remembered that old t-shirt she had worn when she was pregnant with little Jenna. He hadn't realized she had left it behind. That old tattered thing should have been in the trash long ago. Yet his wife had taken the liberty of putting it on and appearing before him in such an inappropriate manner. She looked like a scarecrow, a vegetable gardener. He was even ashamed to look at her. If any of the neighbors saw, Kevin would fall through the ground. Of course, he still had some feelings for Wendy. He really wanted his wife to come to her senses. She should give up her hobby. It did no good, only harm. Wendy wasn't making any money. She had lost her good looks. Soon she won't be able to get in. She won't fit through the doorway. When will it get to her that she needs to change her lifestyle? How do you get it to her that she is making an irreparable mistake? Thinking about all this, Kevin sighed and put the empty plates in the sink. He wanted to wash them, but changed his mind. He'd rather let his wife help. It's good for her to move in the morning. At least she'll shoot her fat. He smirked and went to bed. Some time passed. The situation in the family was getting more and more heated. Kevin was not happy that Wendy did not want to change. Money became even more scarce because Kevin's part-time job had gone under the radar. The competition was too strong. There were too many cab drivers, and Kevin was bringing home pennies. One day, Kevin tried to make things right with his wife by suggesting that she do sports at home. "Wendy, there are so many videos on the internet, you can do something from the comfort of your own home." Stephen told me that his wife lost weight that way. She didn't even have to go to a gym. She just worked out with the help of YouTube videos. "I think it's a good idea. Why do you do it?" he said to her. Wendy frowned and looked at her husband. "Kevin, are you thinking what you are saying? How am I going to study at home? We don't have much space, and I don't have much time either. But if you stopped modeling, we could clear enough room to study. Summer's coming up. You could give up your hobby for a while to take care of yourself. You make me look so bad." Wendy got a little worried. It's not that it's bad. I just want you to look even better. I'm telling you, summer at the seaside. I don't think we'll go this year, but we could go to the river for the weekend. Wouldn't you be ashamed to take your clothes off?" Wendy didn't say anything. Kevin didn't bring it up again, but she realized that she looked worse than she thought. Wendy didn't exercise. She just went on a diet, but it didn't help much because the diet had to be followed. And she forgot to eat during the day and then in the evening. In the end, she lost 5 pounds in a month. But that wasn't enough. Kevin noticed that his wife had lost a little weight, and he perked up. He was constantly complimenting her, trying to encourage her, stimulate her, cheer her up. He did not know that she was on a diet, but thought that she was exercising when he was not at home. But another month went by, and his wife didn't want any more. Kevin started to get discouraged again. Then he thought that if they went out somewhere together, she would see what other women looked like and get smart. He thought they should go out together, and then the opportunity presented itself. It was his best friend, Stephen's birthday. He invited Kevin and his wife to his house for a party. Stephen and his wife lived in a large private house. It was going to be a big party. A lot of people were going to come. It was the right occasion for Wendy to show her face in public. Maybe she'd noticed the stares and realized she needed to do something about herself. He didn't care if he embarrassed you or his wife. He was willing to go to drastic measures to bring Wendy to her senses. He might embarrass himself once, but then he could brag about his slim wife, who would definitely lose weight after such a shakeup. However, when I asked Wendy to go out, she flatly refused. "Kevin, what kind of party? I'm not going out. I don't even have the right outfit. It would take money to buy one, and we don't have any money. In fact, I don't think you should go to Stephen's. I mean, it's a gift. Or should I give money? Our finances are a little tight. You know that, don't you?" Kevin's pissed. "What are you, really? Stephen, my best friend. You're suggesting that if I don't have the money, I'll still go to his birthday party. You know, he won't be offended if I don't get him anything. But if I don't go, if you don't want to go, I'll go anyway. We don't go anywhere. I'm not going to miss this opportunity. I need to have a little fun. Forget about everyday problems. Have fun. Socialize with people, after all. If you don't want to, I'm not going to stay home with you. You can sit there and mold your own stuff. I'd rather go out with my friends, hang out with people, have fun, have a drink. Go ahead. It's not like I'm forcing you to stay home. If you and Stephen have that kind of relationship, go have fun. I'll stay home with the kids." Kevin did just that. He went to Stephen's birthday party, alone, tried to forget about his family. His wife wanted to feel young. Well, he was. He was only 30 years old. Stephen had a very young wife. She was only 24. There were a lot of her young girlfriends at the birthday party. Kevin felt very young in the midst of such a contingent. He had completely forgotten that he had a wife and children. The party was huge and lasted until morning. Kevin didn't even call home to warn Wendy that he would be late. She didn't call him either. And he had a blast. Kevin got pretty drunk. Stephen and his wife invited Kevin to a barbecue the next day. They were going to have a small get-together for a hangover and a good meal. Kevin accepted. He got home at 400. Wendy was sound asleep. Kevin was excited about the party and couldn't sleep for about an hour, remembering the details of the evening. It had been a long time since he had had so much fun and time. Wendy got up before her husband. She didn't bother to wake him up and was hardly angry at him for staying up so late. She sculpted the figure herself until 2 o'clock. She made a very beautiful sculpture, and Wendy was proud of herself. Kevin got up at 11 o'clock and told Wendy he was going to Stephen's again. Of course, he suggested that his wife go with him, but he knew she wouldn't agree. So it turned out that she did. Wendy was not happy that her husband was leaving again. She expected help with the children and chores, but she never told them anything. A noisy group of friends gathered at Stephen's again. There were many of his wife's girlfriends. As he approached the bar to pour himself a beer, someone tapped him on the shoulder. "Maybe I'm on the raid too," he heard a flirtatious voice say. Kevin turned, and his jaw nearly dropped. Standing in front of him was a beautiful young girl. She was looking at him and smiling. Her beautiful long hair didn't fall past her shoulders. A light summer sundress revealed her gorgeous breasts. The girl held an empty glass in her hands and held it out to Kevin. "Sure, I'll pour it." "What kind of question is that? How can you say no to such a beauty?" Kevin replied, smiling. He felt like a male. This cute girl was smiling so invitingly and promisingly at him that his heart even pounded faster. How long had it been since he'd flirted with anyone? And this young woman was so beautiful that it was a pleasure to even talk to her. Kevin poured the girl a beer and held out the glass. "Please, baby, drink up," he said to her. The girl took the glass to her mouth without taking her eyes off Kevin. She took a sip and licked the foam from the beer that remained on her lips with her soft pink tongue. Kevin felt aroused. He was breathless at the sight. But the girl's next phrase brought him back down to earth. "Why are you being so familiar with me? Did I give you permission to do that?" The girl replied with a sly smile. Kevin turned pale. He realized that he had overreacted. It had been too long since he had been with a lady. He had completely forgotten how to flirt. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you." "I'm sorry," he mumbled, stammering. "Come on, I'm kidding." "You're what?" "Let's get right to the point. My name's Emily. From you, Kevin." "Come on, Kevin. Let's dance. My favorite song is playing. I'll never forgive you." "If you don't ask me to dance," Emily said, leaving her glass on the bar. It was the best dance of his life. He forgot about everything in the world. Emily was a marvelous partner. Not only did she move beautifully, but she didn't make Kevin feel inferior since he couldn't dance at all. She complimented him, urged him on with a smile, wagging her hips, pressing tightly against him. After the dance, the girl whispered in his ear, "I haven't danced like that in a long time. I liked it. I'd like to do it again. Not here, but somewhere private. Maybe you'd like to come upstairs with me. There's a place where we won't be disturbed." Kevin was stunned at the suggestion. He had never expected that this young girl could pay attention to him. Naturally, he took advantage of her generous, unexpected offer. In all the years of his marriage, he had never cheated on his wife. Of course, from time to time he had such thoughts, because family problems and everyday life did not allow him to relax. And there had been no intimacy between him and Wendy for a long time. So his sudden love adventure with this young girl excited him very much. Emily apparently also liked everything, because she gave Kevin her phone number and said that she would love to meet him again. Even better, she said he'd love to ask her out on a date. Kevin realized that he needed to set the record straight. So he told the girl, blushing with embarrassment, "Emily, I really like you. But here's the thing. I'm married, I have kids. I'm not arguing. I've had problems with my wife for a long time, but I wasn't gonna leave her. So I don't know if there's any point in us seeing each other." Of course, he really hoped that their next meeting would still take place, but he realized that Emily was too young and she didn't need someone else's problems. A man who was older than her and who has an impressive weight behind his back in the form of a wife and children, she does not need him at all. However, he was very surprised when Emily smiled, took his hand, and whispered, "I don't care. Are you married or not married? I always do what I want to do. I liked you, and I don't see your wife and kids as a barrier. If we're good together, why not meet again? You can decide later. Do you want to see me or not? Don't worry. I'm fine with it for now. I'm not going to pry into your life, call your wife, report on our meetings. I don't need to. I know my worth, believe me. I'm not interested in getting into a fight with my dad. Trust me." Kevin couldn't believe his luck. How could he be so lucky? He had a wife and kids at home. And here he had a charming mistress who agreed on everything and who was needed. Only she didn't care about him, his status, his job, his money. He realized that Emily had money. No idea where it came from. Her parents were providing for her, or someone else. He didn't think about it and didn't want to know. He just wanted to date her because she made him feel like a man again. And then something happened that Kevin hadn't planned for. After 2 months, he realized he didn't want to be with his wife anymore. He wanted Emily. The girl didn't mind living with him either, only on one condition: that he divorce his wife. She didn't insist on it, but she was offered a job in another city and she was going to leave in a month. That's what she said, Kevin. If you want to leave with me, leave your load behind. I'm willing to date you this month until you leave. But if you expect more than that, you have to get a divorce. I'm not taking a married man with me. I don't want any trouble. You can't just leave without an explanation. Will you have to say something to your wife? Admit you have a mistress. She'll start cursing at me. She'll call me. She'll come over with the kids. I don't need that. I don't need that kind of fight. Can you come with me? I don't mind. We'll start a new life. I think you'll like it. Kevin didn't make up his mind. Wendy hadn't changed. At home, they were still fighting, and she was always out on her loggia. Her appearance was deplorable and made him nauseous. And one evening, Kevin realized that it was impossible to delay. He confessed to his wife that he was leaving her for another woman. Wendy was shocked. She didn't know what to say. She hadn't expected this at all. Wendy had noticed that Kevin had been indifferent lately, but it seemed to her that he just didn't want to touch her. She was grateful to him for letting her do what she loved. She had no idea he had someone else. Tears came to her eyes. Wendy wasn't going to cry, though. She knew he didn't like her tears. They annoyed him. She quickly wiped her eyes and asked pitifully, "Kevin, how could it be? We were doing so well. What's wrong with it? You just tell me, I'll try to change. Please, we have kids. Think about them. I don't work. How will we live? Please don't leave me. I'm sure you're not serious. You can't do this to me with another woman. We're gonna make it work. We'll do everything we can to make it work. You remember we made a vow to each other. Does that mean nothing to you? We were happy. Yes, we have problems now, but we can work things out if we want to. I beg you, don't go, don't leave me." Kevin was initially disgusted when Wendy started to speak. He had expected her to keep her dignity and let him go quietly. It made him feel sorry for her. Then he suddenly found it funny. She says he's not serious with another woman. Yes, she realizes he can't even look at her. He hates sleeping in the same bed with her. She's gonna crush him. It's like he doesn't realize he's disgusted to be around her. Kevin couldn't help himself and laughed. Wendy looked at him with horror. "Do you even realize what you're saying? We're solving problems. You sit on your loggia day after day, and you don't even notice that you're as fat as a pig. Look at yourself in the mirror. I'm disgusted to be around you, let alone anything global. I have a girlfriend who's younger than you and has a great figure. She takes care of herself and doesn't call me out with a dirty head or bad breath. Do you do this on a regular basis? I'm tired of it. I'm done with it. You've turned the kids into your own kind too. I don't want to see that. Stay with them. Do what you want. You can't count on me anymore. I'm quitting and going away with my girlfriend. She and I will get married. I'll get a new job. I'm filing for divorce. I won't claim the apartment. I don't need it. I'm leaving it to you and the kids. But don't expect anything more from me. That's it." Kevin packed his things. A couple hours later, he left for good. And Wendy sat in the kitchen with her hands over her mouth to keep from screaming in pain and despair. She didn't know what to do next, and had absolutely no idea how to live alone in this world without a job with 2 children. 2 years passed. Sighing heavily, Wendy walked slowly to the house. Today was the last straw. She could no longer work at the daycare center. She would have quit by now, but she had been fired, and the superintendent hadn't even asked for 2 weeks' pay, seeing the desperation on Wendy's face. After Kevin left, she just didn't know what to do. One of her best friends was working as a kindergarten teacher. Vanessa offered to get her a job as a nanny. Wendy agreed. Vanessa had always envied her friend, although there was nothing to envy, in fact. Her family life didn't work out. Her husband left her. She became fat, but she didn't have a husband at all. So she envied that modest Wendy got married right after college. When Vanessa found out that Wendy had been dumped by her husband, she rejoiced. Offered her a job babysitting at a daycare center. She wanted to gouge her. It was a thankless job. Babysitters got all the dirty work, fiddling with the kids, toileting, cleaning. Vanessa regretted that she couldn't get her friend into her group. She wouldn't have gotten away with it. The superintendent said she needed a nanny for Nancy's group. Wendy came to the daycare center to meet the superintendent. She liked it, and Wendy believed that everything would be fine. She would like her job. She loved being around children. Her hobby of modeling, of course, had to be abandoned indefinitely. Taking care of the children was the priority. Wendy had to work so that there was money to support them. It was very hard for her at first. After graduating from college, she had never worked a day. It was hard for her to go back. Nancy's job was very hard. Nancy was a strict caregiver. When Wendy began to make comments to her about being too strict with the children, the caretaker would glare at her with anger. It wasn't until a month later that Wendy realized she had turned Nancy against herself. The woman was vindictive. She could not tolerate criticism of herself. If she saw that after punishment Wendy tried to comfort the children, she began to shout, "Do you have a higher education that you interfere in the educational process? I punished the child, so he must be punished. What right do you have to interfere? I'm not complaining about you, sir. She'll punish you. That's what you want, to be without a bonus. Do you want your children to starve? Think of them when you're messing with these assholes. Look at you, you've come here to steal. You think you can cross me? I'll show you where it's at. If you ever interfere with my educational work again, you'll regret it, and I won't even know you're Vanessa's girlfriend." Girlfriends? How many times had Wendy tried to explain to Nancy that she had no claim to her job? It was no use. The teacher was bitter and unreceptive. Wendy realized that the job would be too difficult. She tried to talk to her friend, asking Vanessa to convince Nancy that Wendy wasn't so bad. But Vanessa shook her head reproachfully. "You're a fool, Wendy. Why do you bother? Caregivers are a separate case, and you're a nanny. Do your job. You don't mess with kids for no reason." The kid was afraid. "I'm his pants flowing snot. Wipe it off," and he's tense. "Your job is to clean up, put out food, put them to bed. Those are your duties. And the tutor does the teaching. Don't you dare get in there. It's your own fault. You're too smart. You're not acting right." What am I supposed to tell Nancy? She's a smart woman. She's had experience over the years. If she behaves like that with the kids, that's the way it has to be. There's no other way. Stay out of it. You always feel sorry for everyone. People like you make icicles grow up to be inferior people. You'll probably raise your kids the same way. They'll be clinging to your skirt till they're 40. Oh, Wendy, if I'd known you behave like that, I wouldn't have put you here. I'm ashamed of you now. She'll think Nancy thinks I was trying to hurt her by putting you with her. Wendy didn't expect that from her friend. She cried all night after that conversation. She wanted to quit, but she realized she had to work. She had to feed her children, and to do that she had to earn money. She'll be looking for something else in the meantime. Maybe something better will come along. But for now, she has to stay where she is. When Wendy stopped contacting Nancy, it got easier. She stopped clinging, but she kept looking suspiciously for a catch. Wendy thought everything was fine. She'd been working like that for a year and a half. But then something happened that put an end to her job. It happened this morning. There were two kids at daycare who were in constant conflict, Molly and John. Molly had poor parents, ordinary factory workers, and John was the son of rich parents. His mom came to pick him up in an expensive foreign car, all gold and diamonds. She smelled like expensive perfume. She had the latest model of iPhone. She kept changing them every 6 months. Mom's name was Lisa. Nancy was constantly fawning over her, trying to ingratiate herself to her. Lisa regularly delivered packages to her, gave her birthday presents. Not just candy or champagne, but something very expensive. Nancy never revealed what it was, but she was always wearing new silver bracelets, a thin gold ring, or emerald earrings. Obviously, you can't buy that on a teacher's salary. This morning, Molly and John had a big fight. John hit the girl. Wendy often comforted the little girl when John hurt her. She said she had to learn to defend herself. And this time, Molly defended herself. When John hit her, she took a wooden figurine of a dog and hit John's head with it with all her might. The boy bled. He screamed violently and a commotion arose. Nancy began to oohing and eyeing. A nurse was called. Thank God, the cut was small. No stitches were needed. The blood was quickly stopped. The wound was covered with a Band-Aid. Within an hour, everyone calmed down. Naturally, Masha was punished, although the girl assured that John hit her first. She even had a bruise on her temple. But no one saw the incident. Only Wendy believed that Molly was telling the truth. All the other children were in favor of John. They all loved him. He was always giving the children delicious, expensive candy. Molly was being punished. She stood in the corner and cried. When John's mom came in, there was a new commotion. Nancy was ready to fall through the floor. And Wendy witnessed Lisa confronting Nancy and decided to intervene. "You know, it wasn't like you," Nancy says. "I apologize, of course, but I have to tell you the truth. John hit Molly pretty hard. She has a bruise on her temple. She was just defending herself." Lisa frowned at Lisa from head to toe. Then she arrogantly replied, "Who the hell are you? And who gave you the right to talk to me? I didn't think I was talking to you. My name is Wendy. I'm a nanny." "Lisa, you shouldn't be making such a fuss, should you? John's fine. He and Molly made up. Molly's been punished. But you should talk to John, too. He's always picking on Molly and bullying her. He hit her first today. I know that for a fact. Okay, wait. First of all, it's not Lisa. It's Lisa. Second of all, nanny, mind your own business. You forgot your seat. Well, I'll remind you. Your place is in the bathroom. Cleaning the toilet behind my baby and wiping his ass. And don't you ever open your mouth again. Get away from me. I don't want to talk to you." Wendy is stunned by this insult. How dare you talk to people like that? Just because you're rich doesn't give you the right. Yes, I clean toilets and wipe your son's ass. But I'm a human being. I work here. I have responsibilities. And your responsibility is to raise your child. And you don't seem to be doing that at all. Lisa opened her mouth in amazement. And then she started screaming. "How dare you talk to me like that? Have you forgotten who you are? I'll destroy you. You'll never set foot here again. You'll pay a fine for talking to respectable parents like that. You look like you're telling me how to raise my child. Watch yourself. I've never seen such insolence before. If I'd known there were nannies like that working here, I wouldn't have brought my kid here. That's your fault, Nancy. Why didn't you tell me you had someone like that working here? I would have made sure she was out of here a long time ago. I'm going to the superintendent right now, and she'll be fired today. Get out of my sight, or I'll call my husband, and he'll tear this place apart." And Wendy realized she better not mess with this woman. She stuck her hand in the hornet's nest. An hour later, she was summoned by Clara. She regretfully informed her that Wendy was free to go. "You can't work for us anymore." "I can't do anything, unfortunately. Lisa is a very respected person in our town. Or rather, her husband is. They regularly donate large sums of money to the daycare center. They have great connections in the education department, in the ministry, in the administration. If I start defending you, everyone will turn against me. And I value my position. She filed a complaint against you. Said if I don't fire you, she'll go to the police. I don't know what she's talking about. That's why it's better if you leave. I'd put you in another group. But Lisa said if she sees you once, she'll tear the place apart. Unfortunately, you can't hide. I'm sorry, but you don't work here anymore." Wendy was shocked, but to her surprise, even relieved. It was such a hard job, not physically, but mentally. It was too unbearable for her to see all the injustice that reigned in the kindergarten. Children were separated by the status of their parents. The teachers groveled before the rich, humiliated the poor. The nannies were treated like servants. It was horrible. She plunged headfirst into that world. Wendy was disgusted by everything that went on here. Now she was walking home and didn't know what to do next. Luckily, she had managed to raise a small amount of money. Considering she wasn't earning much, it was even a feat. She should have enough for a couple months. However, there was an urgent need to look for a job. When Wendy got home, she went straight to the shower. She needed to cry. She often cried under the shower, so the children wouldn't hear. She didn't want them to see how hard it was for her. This time the tears wouldn't come for some reason. Probably because Wendy was relieved that this hell was finally over. After her shower, she got lost and walked over to the mirror and looked at herself with some indignation. In a year and a half, she had lost 20 kilograms. Against a background of stress, the weight was going away rapidly. The skin began to stagger, and so Wendy began to do exercises on YouTube videos. She was still young, so the skin recovered quickly. Her figure became a slim, taut figure. Of course, there were still traces of stretch marks on her body from the heavy weight, but they were nothing. They were not too noticeable. The closet had to be fiddled with. Some things even had to be sewn together. It was still good that there was a sewing machine at home and Wendy knew how to sew. She didn't have to buy a lot of new things. Her old dresses and John she had sewn together. Of course, they didn't fit so well. Wendy wasn't a professional seamstress, but she thought that would do. Who was she going to show off for? She wasn't looking forward to another relationship. She had children to think about. The disappointment of her marriage with her husband was so strong that she promised herself that she would never marry again, though she didn't even believe anyone would suggest it. Wendy sighed and put on her house dress. She actually felt a lot better after she lost the weight. Breathing easier, sleeping easier, walking easier. Her legs stopped hurting. Her shortness of breath disappeared. Wendy grinned bitterly. Her husband's departure had had a positive effect on her. In a way, tonight the children went to bed on their own. They noticed that their mother was upset and decided not to disturb her. Wendy moved into the kitchen and washed the dishes. She made herself some coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. After sitting for a few minutes and giving in to the urge, she headed to the loggia. Walking in there, she had a strange feeling. How long it had been since she had been here. How long it had been since she had molded anything. It had been a very long time since she had touched, not clay, not plaster. She always felt good when her hands were busy. Maybe if she started molding again, she would feel better. For some reason, since her husband left, she couldn't bring herself to come here. He had always reproached her for being out on the loggia, doing nothing. And now Wendy just couldn't bring herself to even open the box of clay. But today she was relieved to be out of daycare. Why shouldn't she take another decisive step toward changing her life? What would happen if she just sat here for one evening, doing what she likes? Nothing would change. She'll relax, get her mind right. Maybe something would come to mind and find a way out of the difficult situation she was in. It was so wonderful to return to something she loved with all her soul. As soon as her hands touched the instruments, Wendy almost cried. And why was she depriving herself of the pleasure all this time that was going through her head? She could at least sit on the loggia for an hour in the evenings and do what she loved. With bitterness, Wendy realized that it was all because of Kevin. His hurtful words sat firmly in her head, and today it was as if she had gotten rid of it. She realized that she was the only one in charge of her life, and no one has power over her. If she wants something, she'll do it. And she didn't have to think about her ex-husband who didn't appreciate her at all. Wendy sat out on the loggia until morning and made a gorgeous figure. It was a girl who clasped one hand to her heart and raised the other high to the sky. Her face was turned upward. On her head was a shawl that came down to her shoulders. The girl was on her knees. It was incredible. Wendy herself did not realize how she had managed to mold such a masterpiece overnight. Of course, the outlines of the face were not very clear. But every gesture of the kneeling person expressed desperation and at the same time hope that she could get help. Wendy realized that she was not a professional but an amateur, but she was still proud of herself. She hadn't touched clay in over a year and a half, and now she expressed all her emotions in this figurine. It was 6 o'clock when Wendy finished. The clay had already started to cool down, that in a couple hours it would lighten up and look even better. Wendy decided that she would put the figurine on a pedestal and keep it on her shelf in a prominent place so that the figurine would remind her of the difficult state she had been in for a long time, but had now gotten rid of all the bad things that depressed her. Now she was determined that things would be different. She would change her life. Completely out of energy, Wendy collapsed on her bed and slept until 12 noon. The kids got up on their own. Today was a day off. Charles made himself and Jenna cocoa and small sandwiches. Wendy woke up to a phone call. It was her friend Evelyn calling. "What are you doing, honey? You thought you were gonna drive me crazy. Vanessa told me you got fired. I've been calling you all night, and your phone was off. I wondered what happened. You scared me so much. I could kill you." What's wrong with your phone? Wendy was wide awake and barely realized what Evelyn was saying. She stretched and answered in a sleepy voice, "Oh, nothing's wrong. I got fired, yeah. The Kikimora told you that. I don't want to talk to her. I should have stopped talking to her a long time ago. I just unplugged my phone and worked on the loggia till morning. And now you woke me up. I was working." You started sculpting again. "Wendy, what's going on with you?" "I'm worried. I don't know what's going on with me. I feel a change in me, but I haven't quite figured it out. I'm not sure," Wendy said. "How's that? I'll come over tonight with a bottle of wine, and you can tell me everything in order. And what's your beef with Vanessa? Why do you keep turning your phone off?" "I'll see you tonight." Wendy didn't even have time to answer. Evelyn hung up. Wendy wanted to spend tonight molding too, but she knew that if Evelyn promised, she would come. Her friend came tonight and brought with her not even a bottle of wine, but 2 whole bottles. As the first bottle was coming to an end, they had already had time to discuss her relationship with Vanessa, her job at the daycare center, leaving her ex-husband, and parenting. While Wendy was guffawing over the second bottle, Evelyn went to the loggia. Wendy found her there. Her friend had an interested look on her face. She was looking at the figurine that Wendy, you molded during the night. "Wendy, I haven't seen work like this before. You have real talent. You sure you haven't been practicing all this time?" "No. I sat down to work yesterday for the first time in a long time. I made this figure overnight. Does it look good to you too?" Wendy asked me hopefully. "It's not bad." "Yeah, it's gorgeous. I can't even believe you did it. Listen, I had an idea. I used to think it was just a hobby, but now I see it as more than that. You know, I think people should see what you're doing. Our city museum has regular exhibitions, photographs, paintings, sculptures. Why don't you send a photo of your work there? And in general, I think you can earn money from it. Would you send your work to auction houses that sell contemporary art? I saw it on TV once. They have all kinds of stuff on display. Some of it's gorgeous, and some of it's a load of crap. But there are people who like that kind of stuff, and some of them make a pretty good living at it. You have a gift. Why don't you try your luck?" Wendy grinned nervously. "Oh, Evelyn, you say that too. What auction houses? Who would want my fake?" Evelyn took her friend's hand. "Wendy, but it's not just a fake, it's a masterpiece. I assure you it deserves everyone's attention. If I'm not a connoisseur of modern art, I think it's worthy of reward. But the real connoisseurs will tear such a work off with their hands and feet, believe me. In fact, you can just try your luck without expecting anything. If it doesn't work out, there's no disappointment. What if you get lucky? Imagine how lucky that would be. You never know where success is waiting for you. What if it's what you need? I can see you put a lot of thought into this figure. I think I can even hear it whispering a prayer. Think about what I told you. If you lose it, I'll help you. Together. This is a helmet, a letter with pictures, and I'll help you compose a literate letter." Wendy swung away and found herself. However, it also planted doubts in her. There's a reason she had the figure in one night. It must be worth something. And Wendy had put her soul into it. Maybe someone will really like it. Maybe she'll even get money for it. It's a fantasy world, of course. But still, you never know. Anything could happen. But after her friend left, Wendy gave up the idea. Under the influence of alcohol, she believed in something that cannot be. Exhibitions and auctions are for people who know something about art. Who is she? No one learned anything or anywhere. She was just a single mom, 2 kids, and she had to find some kind of job to feed them. And it's a hobby for the soul and solace. But it can't be serious. As her husband rightly said, foolishness will not bring her income and success. Wendy began to look for work. She wanted to get a job as a nurse, but they wouldn't take her anywhere. She stayed at home for years, never worked a day after college. One hospital told her her degree was invalid. She had to specialize and retrain to get it validated. Wendy didn't know if it was true or not, but she didn't have time to study again. She needed to find a job. She got a job at a store as a saleswoman, but after a month she was fired because there was a big shortage. Wendy realized she might have been at fault. She had never been involved with money. It was hard for her to get involved in her job. She was constantly miscalculating, wrong on the numbers. Customers complained about her that she worked too slowly, and she realized that this job was definitely not for her. She had to take a job as a janitor for a while, cleaning the entrances. She was ashamed that she had an education and worked as a cleaner, but it gave her some income. For a while, she had to give up her hobby again. Every time she went to the loggia, she remembered the words of her friend and immediately left without even taking the job, trying not to remember what Evelyn had told her. It was too tempting. It was so much that it seemed like a pipe dream. And then one weekend, Wendy felt very dreary one evening. So she decided to mold something. She took a bottle of wine out of the cupboard, put the kids to bed, and poured herself a glass. She sat down on her chair on the loggia. After sitting there for half an hour, I realized my hands itched. She sighed, poured herself another glass, and started to lay out her tools. This time she sat up again until morning. And you molded the figure of a man. He wore a cloak and folded his arms across his chest. His head was slightly down, as if he were looking at something. His whole posture expressed arrogance and denial. When the figure was finished, Wendy looked at it carefully and suddenly it hit her. She pushed the barbell away and took out a kneeling figure of a woman from the windowsill. And she put the woman next to the man. And her mouth dropped open in surprise. These figures complemented each other. It was as if they did not exist separately, but were one. The woman was kneeling and reaching out her hand towards the man. He stood looking down at her, as if the woman were asking for mercy and the man was rejecting her. Oh, it was all Wendy could say. It was indeed a work worthy of being seen by others. Wendy has nothing to be ashamed of. She is an amateur, but she executed these masterpieces with such soul and feeling that they conveyed all her emotions, as if she had poured into these figures all that she felt. She felt a lightness on her soul, despite the fact that she was almost halfway through a bottle of wine. There was clarity in her mind. Wendy firmly realized what she would do next, leaving the figurines on the table. She walked to the bedroom, fell on the bed, and instantly passed out. A couple hours later, she woke up and immediately called, and not. I'm going to send you one picture now. It's another of my works. Tell me if it makes you feel like something's missing. Look, and then she called me back. Okay, Wendy said. Yeah, go ahead. I'm waiting. Evelyn answered, and Wendy took a picture of the male figure and sent it to Evelyn. Exactly a minute later, there was a call from her friend. Wendy answered the call with her hand pressed to her heart. I know what the figure of that woman kneeling is missing. It's like it's one sculpture, isn't it? Did you sculpt a man specifically for her? Evelyn asked excitedly. No, I didn't think at all. What about the kneeling female figure? I would have molded a man. Just so thoughtful, replied Wendy. No, darling. You sculpted her consciously. You have a real gift. You had the whole picture in your head without even thinking. Now I'm 1000% sure you have to send photos of your work. Wendy sighed and closed her eyes. You're probably right. It's worth a shot, she told her friend. And then it all spun and spun. A representative of one of the auctions that happened to be held in their town responded to Wendy's letter. They were interested in her figurines and gladly agreed to auction them off. Wendy couldn't believe her luck. The auction was to take place in a week. Wendy was sent 2 invitation cards. She decided to go along with Evelyn, who was the instigator of the whole thing. And then even more wonderful things began to happen. At the auction, several buyers were interested in Wendy's work. The first day of the auction was simply an exhibition. People were walking around, looking at various pieces of contemporary art. Near Wendy's sculpture was a lot of people. She was afraid to approach, very worried that no one liked her work, but she was wrong. Her sculpture of 2 figures made a sensation. The next day, there was an auction, and there were several people competing for her sculptures. The final price of the male and female figurines stunned Wendy. Given the fact that the organizers of the auction received a solid percentage, Wendy still had a very impressive amount of money on their hands. She couldn't believe her good fortune. Even stranger magical events happened after the auction. She was approached by several representatives of exhibitions from other cities. She was offered to exhibit her work with them. Wendy admitted that she didn't have enough works yet. The organizers agreed to wait a few months for her to prepare for the exhibitions. The amount of money raised for the figurines of a man and a woman was enough for her to live comfortably for a few months. All the while, Wendy worked, and every day added a new sculpture. After she exhibited her work in several cities, she gained popularity. Her sculptures plummeted at an enviable rate. Wendy got the kind of money she had never seen in her life. And then she was offered to exhibit work in the city. The Museum of Modern Art gave her a small room where she could exhibit as much of her work as she wanted. It was a free exhibition. Here you could not only look, but also buy. Wendy quickly gained immense popularity. In 2 years, she was not only rich, but also famous in her town. It was a real success, the success she had been striving for from the very beginning, and she was able to achieve everything. Now she was confident and self-sufficient. One could no longer worry about the future. She would be able to feed her children. Kevin looked at the television screen with annoyance. He saw his ex-wife. It had been 10 years since they had divorced. Everything had changed. Kevin was slowly getting drunk and his wife was on TV. Does he deserve to live like that? Is that fair? After his divorce from Wendy, Kevin moved to another city with Emily. 6 months later, she left him. You see, he was infringing on her freedom too much. All he wanted was for her to marry him. He never found a decent job, so he started to drink himself into oblivion. It bothered him that Emily was constantly disappearing at work with new friends. In the end, the girl could not stand it and sent him to all 4 sides. Kevin had a small savings and he rented an apartment. He went to work at a factory. However, the craving for alcohol did not subside, but only became more and more heated. He worked at the factory for 10 years. He was not made a foreman because Kevin was too fond of alcohol. Didn't start a new relationship, got angry at women. After Emily, he didn't trust anyone. There were casual hookups. One woman even liked him. She wanted to live with him, but his addiction to alcohol destroyed any good thing that could have happened to him. Kevin was alone in the world, not socializing with his children. Never even thought about his ex-wife, and now he sees her on TV. He immediately went to the internet and found a lot of interesting things. It turns out that his wife has become a very popular and rich woman and still achieved success. Her hobby has grown into a professional job. Apparently, she earned a decent fortune on her hands. She had a fancy house, a fancy foreign car. Is there really that much money in sculptures that she got so rich? He had to eke out a miserable existence in this rented barca working in a factory. It wasn't fair. Why couldn't she have been successful when they were married? And why wasn't she so pretty? She had lost a lot of weight. Slim, well-groomed, completely different from the fat one he had her in front of him. He'd only recognized her because her name had come up on TV. Of course, when he looked closer, he realized it was Lisa. Her hobby on the old loggia had turned his ex-wife into a successful hottie. Out of grief, Kevin got so drunk that he couldn't go to work in the morning. When he woke up and got hungover, he looked at the rings on his phone. He had been called 50 times. Ward decided to ignore his boss. He already knew what he was going to do. He would return home and ask his ex-wife for help. She should help him. He helped her when they were married, provided for the family. When she decided she wanted to pursue art, he bought her tools for her to play with on the loggia. Yes, he did all that, and she should help him too. And he'll try to connect with his kids. And he'll cry and say he's sorry for what happened. He'd say he was just embarrassed to be around them because he'd abandoned them, beg for forgiveness. He really hoped that with the help of his former family, he could get his life together. That same day, Kevin bought a train ticket, packed a suitcase, and left for his hometown, hoping he was on his way to a new life. Right on with the suitcase. He stood outside the house of Wendy and his children, rang the bell on the gate several times, but no one answered him. 12 o'clock, he stood by the gate, occasionally sitting down on his suitcase. His legs were aching with fatigue. He was terribly hungry, but he waited stubbornly, not wanting to miss his chance. Wendy arrived in the evening. The gate started to open long before the car arrived. Kevin immediately jumped up and stood beside them so she couldn't drive past. The car stopped a few feet away from him. Wendy got out of the car and turned pale, and when she recognized her husband, "Kevin, is it really you?" Lisa said in amazement. Kevin smiled slightly and spread his hands. "Yes, that's me. Wendy, I really need to talk to you. Can you spare some time for me? It's important." "Talk? I don't know what we can talk about." "All right, well, stand back. I'll drive to the garage, open the gate, and you can come in." A few minutes later, Kevin was at his ex-wife's new home. He looked around admiringly. The house was just huge. He could never have dreamed of such a thing. And his wife had been able to earn money for it on her own. It made him feel even more queasy. Wendy took him into the study. "So what did you want to talk to me about?" Coldly, she asked. And then Kevin began to put his plan into action. In that tone, he began to tell about his life. Said that the girl who seduced him, deceived him in the cruelest way, forced him to divorce Wendy, promising to get him a high-paying job in another city. But it was all a deception. When they moved, she left him, and he wandered the streets trying to find sustenance. Then a kind man got him a job at a factory. He slept in a homeless shelter for a while, and then he was able to rent an apartment. All this time, he was very sorry for what he had done to Wendy and the children. He was terribly ashamed to approach her, and now he'd been laid off, and he couldn't rent an apartment anymore. He'd asked Wendy for help, asked her to let him live in their old apartment. He was starting a new life, trying to get along with the kids. He talked nonstop. Wendy couldn't even get a word in edgewise. The apartment was sold. She finally managed to speak up. "What am I going to do? I was counting on her so much. Where am I supposed to go? I don't want anything from you. I won't bother you anymore. I just wanted to stay in the apartment until I get back on my feet. I really want to bond with our kids. I'm so sorry I missed those 10 years. I've lost so much, but I only have myself to blame. What am I supposed to do? I'm going to go. I have nothing more to do here. I'm sorry if I bothered you." Kevin sighed, gave me a sad look, and stood up, getting ready to leave. "Wait, sit down." Wendy stopped him. Kevin gave her a brief glance and lowered his eyes to the floor, sitting down modestly on the edge of the chair, his hands folded in front of him. Wendy thought about something for several minutes, tapping her fingers on the table and never taking her eyes off her husband. She felt sorry for him. Indeed, he had supported her when she had decided to take up sculpture. At one point, he had even believed she would succeed. She tried to forget the insults he had hurled before he left. Indeed, if the girl seduced him, forced him to divorce, then he was only partly to blame for the breakup of their family. He was ashamed to call, and that was a good thing. So he realized he was at fault in front of her, in front of the kids. Maybe we should give him a second chance. Wendy wasn't going back to him, of course. She just wanted to help. If he could connect with the kids, they'd have a father. He deserves to be happy too. After all, she'd achieved everything. Why not share some of it with her ex-husband? He meant a lot to her once. Now she has no feelings for him, only pity. But he deserved a fresh start, and she was willing to help. "Okay, I'll help you, but I'm not doing it because you told me about your life. I'm doing it because you're the father of our children. We had good times too, and we loved each other. That's in the past. But in memory of the good times, I will do what I can. I'll give you money and have my assistant find you a place to live. I'll buy a little house for you where you can start a new life. I'll help you get a job. I know a lot of people. They'd be happy to help me, but just promise me you'll behave yourself. I can't vouch for you if I'm not sure." She gave him the money, and Kevin got a hotel room. A week later, Wendy called to say she had finalized the purchase of the house. She dictated an address for him to drive up there, and that evening, she gave him the keys. "I'll give you the phone number. You will call a man named Robert, and he will help you with the job. I'm leaving tomorrow with the kids to go to a trade show. I told them you were back, and they've agreed to hang out. I'll be in Europe. We'll be back in 3 weeks. When I call you, you can meet them. Charles is acting a little wary, but Jenna is very enthusiastic about your return. She's very hopeful that things will work out. Don't let me down, Kevin. I've done enough. All you have to do is take advantage of my help. If everything goes well for you, I'll be glad. Everything's gonna be fine. I promise I won't let you down gladly, Kevin replied. The next day, Wendy flew with the kids to a trade show. Sitting on the airplane, she felt uneasy. She felt as if something bad was going to happen, but she thought it was her husband's return. He had stirred up too much with his arrival. She hoped everything would be all right. 3 weeks passed. Wendy returned from her trip and called Robert, who told her that her ex-husband had never called him. Wendy was very surprised by this, and she went to Kevin's house. What she saw when she arrived shocked her. He came out to her unshaven and inhaled such a breath of booze that she almost recoiled. Her husband had been a real drunk at home all these days. Kevin, what's going on? Why didn't you call Robert? He was supposed to get you a job. And what kind of company are you having at your house? You're having a party. Oh, Wendy. You're back? Why didn't you call? I would have prepared for your arrival. These are old friends of mine from the factory. I used to work with them. I didn't call Vladimir because I found a job on my own. I only worked 3 days, but that doesn't matter. I'll find it anyway. We're celebrating Sam or Rick's birthday right now. Or maybe Jack, I can't remember, but it doesn't matter. I'm gonna kick everyone out and we can talk. But Wendy refused to talk to him. She now decided she would come the next day and hoped he would be sober. The day after tomorrow, Kevin met her already sober, but from the look and the smell coming off him, she realized he'd been drinking for more than 24 hours. Before she could say a word, he started crying again, apologizing to her, saying he would find a job and get his mind right. It's just that these shocks had made him crave alcohol, and he was so happy to see his old friends. Wendy, it's gonna be okay. I won't let you down. I'll get my head on straight. I promised you. I promised you faithfully. Only I've been treating my friends for days on end, and I've run out of money. Can you give me more? I'll give you everything, I promise. I'll earn it and give it back. You just have to help me again. I need to get cleaned up and have something to live on while I look for a job. I won't let you down. You believe me, don't you? Wendy realized her ex-husband was using her, and she fell for it. Unfortunately, he had become the ultimate alcoholic over those 10 years, and now he was just manipulative, trying to elicit pity. She wasn't even sure he was telling her the truth about his life. Most likely, the girl he cheated on her with didn't force him to divorce. He'd done it of his own volition, and he'd just been stringing her along. Now she realized why she was so uneasy in her heart. It was as if she sensed that this was not going to be the way she wanted it to be. Wendy refused to give him the money when he heard a firm no. His eyes flashed angrily. What do you mean no? What do you mean no? Are you even thinking straight? We have kids together. I'm their father. You're obligated to help me. I'm going to tell the kids that you bullied me, he said angrily. The kids? You're going to tell the kids that I bullied you? Well, why don't you tell them? Why you left us, and in 10 years you never even called us? Wendy asked with a chuckle, but Kevin didn't seem to hear her. He kept saying the same thing over and over again. You owe me a favor. You owe me a favor. You hear me? You got tons of money. A fancy house. I'm the one who made it all happen. You made it all happen. I supported you. You have to support me. Otherwise, I don't know what I'm going to do to you. And Wendy laughed. She realized how absurd this whole situation was. She must get rid of him soon. She doesn't want to be around her ex-husband anymore. You know what? Don't call me again. I won't pick up the phone. Live here as long as you want. Pay the utilities. If you don't pay, you'll regret it. I don't need this house. You'll need it if it goes into foreclosure. I won't be upset. I'm not going to help you with money anymore. Remember, I'll tell the kids. It's up to you. What do you want to do? You have 2 choices. Leave it alone or get smart. Your future depends on you. Kevin, Wendy left without regretting meeting her husband 10 years later in this way. She was just convinced that she could no longer rely on him. She wouldn't think about it. Let him live his life as he likes. She has her own life. 2 years passed. Wendy stood in the bridal salon in front of a huge mirror. She was wearing a gorgeous white dress by a popular designer. Soon, she would be the wife of a beautiful man she had met in Europe. It was strange that their meeting had taken place so far from home. After all, the man was from the same city as her. Sebastian turned out to be a successful businessman. He had a chain of restaurants, and he was a lover of modern art. He was madly fond of the sculptures that Wendy created, and he even bought a few of her pieces. He had them in his house. And then they met in Europe and fell in love from the first time they met. But at least that's what Sebastian said. Wendy had treated him with distrust for a while. After her ex-husband, she didn't trust men. But Sebastian made her believe and love him so much that she even agreed to marry him, though not the first time. Sebastian had to propose to her 3 times. It was only the 3rd time that she agreed. During these 2 years, not only good things happened, there were also unpleasant moments. They concerned her ex-husband. After their last meeting, he didn't get his act together. He continued to drink, borrowing money from friends. Alcohol did not let him go so easily during another drunkenness. He burned down the house and miraculously survived. He found himself on the street, begging and homeless. Then, in a drunken rage, he tried to rob a small store. He didn't succeed. They rounded him up, called the cops. Last thing Wendy knew, he went to jail. She never heard from him again. Whether he was still in jail or out or dead, nothing more was known to her. But his fate no longer worried Wendy. She was happy. She was able to build a new life, to succeed. She had found her soulmate, and it was so wonderful that she was ready to scream at the world with happiness. And she screamed quietly to herself, in her mind,